Hello, my name is Peter Parfitt. Welcome to the new Brit workshop. I've got some ideas for you today how to make some simple presents. Inexpensive, reasonably easy to do, certainly the sort of thing you could do within a day in the workshop. I'm using just workshop scraps that I've had lying around for a little while, bits and pieces left over from other projects. Now, one of the advantages of what I'm about to show you is that you can then impress your loved one with your skills and perhaps justify all that money that you might have spent on those lovely tools that you have. Now, the first thing we're going to do is to take this piece of oak. In fact, it's 3 pieces which have been joined together, and we're going to make, well, guess what? It's going to be a chopping board or a bread board. All I need to do is to true it up a bit, and then we'll put a decorative edge around the outside, sand it up, and I'll use a bit of oil on it or something like that, which will be suitable for use in a kitchen. And remember to say to your other half, do you know, I couldn't have done it without that sander. It made all the difference. And I'm giving this quite a generous coat of Osmo top oil. Top oil is designed for kitchen work surfaces. It's food safe. And what I want to do, I want this to soak in nicely. And I'll wipe the excess off. I'm concentrating on these end grains. Want plenty in there. Now, if it's just going to be a breadboard, then you don't actually need to put any oil of any description on it, because my experience of breadboards is they get used for other things, so it's probably best to put something on. There you go. Just one coat of that is all I think it needs. Now, if you don't want to use Osmo top oil, which actually I think is probably the best of the lot, you could always use olive oil, just ordinary olive oil. That'll give a sort of finish. You'll probably find yourself having to redo it about once a week, but it will do. But there we go. There's little Prezi number 1. I've got this odd end of sapele. It's 63 millimeters square in section, and it's probably about 250 millimeters long. And I was sort of trying to work out what I might make with this. I suddenly realized I use a lot of rechargeable batteries, and so I could make a little box specially for rechargeable batteries. Let's give it a go. The box is made with 3 pieces of wood, and I'm going to cut them on the Capex, and I'll show you what we do with them after I've done the cutting. That's the first piece. And here's the second piece. And what I've got now is this piece, which will be the top of the top and will be glued back on in a minute. And then this large piece is the top, or the bottom of the top, and the main body. And the reason the top and the main body are in one piece at the moment is I'm going to drill the holes through here, which will take the batteries. After I've drilled those so that they're all in the same line, I can then glue this top back on. Now, this Incra marker that I bought from the woodworker's workshop is absolutely brilliant, and it really comes into its own when you're trying to do fiddly stuff like this. I'm marking the center lines for the various holes I've got to drill. Right, I've marked it up, and I'm going to drill a very small pilot in each of these 9 places now to help me find the right place for the Forstner bit to go, which will drill out the main hole. That's those little pilot holes done. Now I can put the Forstner bit in. Now I've set my depth stop such that I can drill down to within 5 millimeters of the bottom of this. Now, so that we put the top back on in the correct place, I'm going to have a couple of pins which will be mounted in the base, which will go into the top. So I've got a 4mm drill here, and I'm going to drill in 2 places to create that. That's that. We can now cut this through in the next place. Right, I'm holding this block of wood with another piece of wood here, and I've got a piece of wood at the front I'm holding with my hand. My hand's going to go nowhere near this, and I'm going to do this really slowly and carefully. I've just got some tiny little bits of breakout here, which has been caused during the sawing process, and that will come off very easily with a little bit of sandpaper in those holes. So I've now put the 3 pieces together. There's the top of the top, which goes onto the top, will be glued onto the top shortly. That makes the top, and there's the bottom. So we've got all the holes that will line up. We've got the keys provided by these 4mm stud holes. And that's the thin bit joined back onto the top. Well, that's it. I gave it a light sand and put a little bit of Poly-X. I put my locating pins in, which were 4mm brass pieces, and I've put some batteries in just to show you what this thing is designed to do. And there we go. Nice little neat storage box for your batteries. I've got here one of the many offcuts that I've got of walnut left over from making my pedestal desk. And it's an insignificant piece that would go on the fire probably, but with this I'm going to make a pair of small tongs for the kitchen. And these are the sort of tongs you'd use if you were grilling bacon and you needed to turn it over and didn't want to burn your fingers. You'd use these tongs. And this gives you a rough idea of what the tongs will look like. They're made of 3 pieces of wood, a side piece here and a side piece there, which do the tonging action, and between the 2 there's a fillet which is cut at an angle. And I'm just going to put a hole there we go. There's a hole dead center, and it's about 50mm from the end. But the next thing I want to do is to take the piece of wood with the hole away from me, and I'm going to mount it onto a piece of MDF. Now this back edge is my reference edge, but I want the piece of walnut to be a good 25 to 30mm away from that back edge, and you'll see why shortly. I've also got to make sure that the piece of wood is mounted on the MDF square in relation to that back edge. So I'll put 1 screw in first, and then I'll do an accurate adjustment for square. Now let's get this nice and square. That's pretty good. There we go. Basically what I've done is I've used 2 screws to hold this on the board. Right, I've now got the capex set up in trenching mode. That means this lever here is pushed forward. And I've adjusted the depth of the trench so that it will go just into the MDF, but not by too much. In fact, I'll just raise it a little bit further. So it's just going into the MDF, but not too much. And I've set my angle here to 2.5 degrees. Now this next bit requires a little bit of judgment and obviously a lot of care. I'm now going to do a cut at this 2.5 degree angle, which will take off the outer edge of this piece of wood, and I'll just start the cut on this corner edge here. So that's the first cut done, and now I'm going to do a second cut not far from it, which will then take off the piece of wood which will be the main part of one leg of the tongs. Now this time I'm setting up my laser so that I just clip the hole here. So there we go, that's that piece. I now need to keep this very carefully and put it to one side. We're now going to set up to do the similar operation on the other side. So first of all, I'm going to reset my angle to minus 2.5 degrees. I now have my 2 pieces of wood, which I've carefully put to one side because I want them to match up in a minute. Right, and this is what we've been left with from the middle, and the piece we want is this top piece here. And I'm now going to do a cut at right angles straight through here. And in order to do a right angle cut, I've set this back 2.5 degrees to the right, and I'm going to do my cut. So that's the piece we want. We do need to do a little bit of cleaning up where I've cut it through with a saw on that final cut. And so I'm going to put this piece here. I've got a piece of dowel, a piece of sandpaper, and I'm just going to give this a little whisk through. And that's pretty good. And now you can give these pieces a very light skim with the plane. And if you haven't got one already, get yourself one of these low angle jack planes from Veritas. Absolutely brilliant. It's time to glue this up now. I didn't mention, I should have done, that I've put some telltale marks on here so I know which piece goes up against which side of the centerpiece. Gluing up is fairly easy. I just spread that evenly. Now I'm not actually using waterproof glue. I should do. I have got some somewhere, but it's not ready to hand. So there's the glue on. And now we make sure our marks line up. Now we do need to make sure this is clamped really well. Now, of course, we've got 2 5-degree angles here, and that doesn't make it particularly easy to clamp. But you remember we had some offcuts. Smooth side on the inside, smooth side on the inside. And again, you don't need to fuss around with this too much. And the key thing is to make sure that these legs are in a straight line, which they are. And so we'll leave that overnight. Well, that's dried overnight very nicely. It's just very slightly stiff. So when I do the sanding, which will be to round these edges off here and round this back end off, I'm just going to take a little bit off the thickness here, just to make it a little less stiff. When I do rounding over sanding like this, I try and hold the sander still, it's in rotary mode, and then move the workpiece accordingly, like this. And I don't know if you can see well enough, but that's coming along quite nicely. This is 80 grit at the moment. And that's very nearly there now. I'm just going to give it a very light finish off by hand using some 240 grit. Right, now just a bit of Osmo top oil, and then it's done. And I hope you can see that by doing the construction the way we've done, it tends to look as though this is really still one solid piece of wood, when in fact we know we've cut it and rejoined it.